Number 10. Iram of the Pillars. The Quran makes several mentions of an ancient city or a region called Iram of the Pillars. Roman and Nabatean traders reportedly recognized it for its vast wealth and its lofty buildings. Some believe that Iram was the home of a mighty tribe called the Ad. The Quran says they came right after the time of Noah and built monuments on elevated places. The city sometimes went by the name of Ubar and may have functioned as the capital of the kingdom of Ad. According to the Quran, a catastrophic wind blew through the region for 7 days straight and buried Iram in the sand, leaving no trace of it visible to the naked eye. What's left of it, if anything, is thought to be somewhere on the Arabian Peninsula. Nobody has ever found evidence of Iram being a real place, leading some experts to believe that Iram might have been a myth, the product of folklore that's been handed down through the generations. But even if this is the case, the stories may be rooted in a real place. Many people have searched for Iram, but it remains shrouded in mystery to this day. T. Lawrence, better known as Lawrence of Arabia, described the elusive ancient city as the Atlantis of the Sands. In other words, even if Iram actually existed, it continues to hide from everyone, but there are some desperately trying to find it. Number 9. Greenland Vikings. Eric the Red was a Viking who was exiled from Iceland in 982 for committing a murder. He led a fleet of 25 boats to Greenland, where the settlers established 2 communities. The first one, known as the Eastern Settlement, was situated near the island's southwestern coast. The other village, you guessed it, the Western Settlement, was located roughly 404 miles to the north along Greenland's western coast. There were initially around 500 settlers consisting mostly of wealthy farmers and chieftains who established farmsteads and built Christian churches. They fished, hunted wild caribou and seals, and kept livestock including cattle, sheep, and goats. The Eastern Settlement grew to include around 500 farms, while the Western Settlement had just 100. At its peak, the colony's population numbered around 5,000 people. When Norwegian missionary Hans Egede arrived in Greenland in 1721, he found the settlements in ruins, and the residents had vanished. Researchers don't know what happened to these communities. They think it may have something to do with a mini ice age during the 13th century that was triggered by a massive volcanic eruption in Indonesia. Evidence shows that around that time, Norse Greenlanders switched to a diet that consisted mainly of marine animals. This indicates that their livestock may have died off during the sudden cold spell. Many experts argue that climate change alone cannot explain the Greenland Vikings' disappearance. Instead, they blame a combination of factors, including the possibility that some residents return to Europe. But the plain and simple truth is that our understanding of the circumstances is unclear. Number 8. The Vinca Civilization. The Neolithic Vinca Civilization, also called the Danube Valley Civilization, originated as early as 7000 BC. It grew to occupy a vast swath of southeastern Europe, including parts of modern-day Serbia, Kosovo, Bulgaria, Romania, and Macedonia. The Vinca culture is widely considered the cradle of European civilization. Its people built some of the largest prehistoric settlements in the region, fueled a population boom, and played a major role in advancing farming after it was introduced to the area. The Vinca developed a plow for sowing their crops and began using copper eating utensils at least 1,000 years before they became common in Europe. They were not culturally unified, but maintained solidarity by trading all kinds of ritual objects and goods over a vast network of settlements. Zoomorphic and anthropomorphic figures were defining aspects of the Vinca culture. The civilization used around 700 symbols, which some scholars classify as one of the earliest forms of writing. Evidence indicates that some Vinca settlements were occupied for at least 1,000 years before they were abandoned for unknown reasons. Number 7. The Mississippians. Between 800 and 1600 AD, a Native American civilization called the Mississippians thrived throughout much of the United States. They built a trade network of loosely connected urban villages and satellite settlements, many of which contained large earthen platform mounds. The architecture varied by region, but the settlements were tied to a common culture and belief system centered around ritual game playing. As far as experts know, the Mississippians did not have any stone architecture or a writing system. The culture originated in the Mississippi River Valley. Its largest city and religious center, Cahokia, was located in what is now southern Illinois. The extensive Mississippian trade network stretched as far west as the Rocky Mountains, east to the Atlantic Ocean, north to the Great Lakes, and south to the Gulf of Mexico. Mississippians differed from other Native American societies in numerous ways. They intensively farmed maize and had a complex chiefdom and social structure, which led to a level of inequality that was seemingly absent from other Native American cultures. The civilization peaked between 1200 and 1400, at which point it began to decline. Warfare and political turmoil increased, prompting many of Cahokia's residents to leave. By 1500, most factions of the Mississippian culture had dispersed or were in severe distress. Very few settlements were still around when Native Americans and Europeans came into contact for the first time. Several modern indigenous groups are thought to descend from the Mississippians, including the Alabama, Appalachee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Osage, and Seminole, just to name a few. Number 6. The Aksum. The Aksumite Empire was an African kingdom that spanned modern-day Eritrea and northern Ethiopia, as well as parts of Djibouti, Somalia, and Somaliland. It rose to power around 80 AD and met its mysterious downfall in 825 AD. The Kingdom of Aksum was a major player along a commercial trade route between the Roman Empire and ancient India. It used its far-reaching power to influence politics and societies as far away as the Arabian Peninsula across the Red Sea. Aksum was also the first sub-Saharan empire to mint its own coins and adopt Christianity. During the early 7th century, the Aksumites stopped making new currency. Around the same time, residents were forced to flee inland, where they sought refuge on higher ground from some sort of upheaval. The capital was abandoned and resettled at an unknown location. The Aksumite Empire is one of the least documented civilizations. Historians know little about it, and the reasons for its collapse are a mystery. One theory suggests that the Aksumites became economically isolated as other civilizations came to dominate the Red Sea, and that this triggered their downfall. According to legend, a Jewish queen named Yodit, or Judith, ordered the burning of Aksum's Christian churches around 960, but many historians question whether this story is true or if Judith even existed to begin with. Another story claims that a pagan queen from a rival tribe was responsible for ending the Aksumites' power. Climate may have also been a factor. During the 1st century, it rained more than usual, increasing the region's food supply. But there was a huge population to support, and it's possible that the land could no longer handle the intense farming that was required to keep people fed. Number 5. Nineveh. Nineveh was an ancient Assyrian city situated on the outskirts of Mosul in what is now Iraq. It was settled as early as 6000 BC during the late Neolithic period. By 3000 BC, Nineveh had become a major religious center dedicated to the Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar. The walled city was built along a fault line and experienced numerous earthquakes, including one that destroyed its temple to Ishtar. Despite these occasional setbacks, Nineveh became a major learning center and functioned as the capital of the Assyrian Empire for much of its existence. It grew to include parks, aqueducts, canals, an 80-room palace, and a library that housed 30,000 clay tablets. People lived there continuously for thousands of years. In the 50 years leading up to 612 BC, Nineveh was the world's largest city. That year, a coalition of allied forces sacked and razed Nineveh. The intruders massacred many of the city's residents and deported others to the countryside. Nineveh never recovered from the destruction, but it wasn't fully abandoned. In the centuries following the attack, the city fell under the rule of various civilizations, including the Seleucid Empire, the Parthian Empire, the Sasanian Empire, and finally the Arabs. By the 13th century, Nineveh was reduced mostly to ruins. Today, the site consists of 2 large mounds and the remains of the city's massive stone and mud brick wall that was built around 700 BC. Sadly, what's left of Nineveh is losing its battle to the elements, looters, and the Islamic State terrorist group, which threatened to eliminate or destroy any remaining evidence of its long and rich history. Number 4. Kukuteni Tripillions. The Neolithic Kukuteni Tripillion culture rose to prominence around 5500 BC. Its people settled across parts of what is now Eastern Europe, including modern-day Russia, Moldova, and Ukraine. Between 4000 BC and 3500 BC, the Kukuteni Tripillions built Neolithic Europe's largest settlements, with populations numbering between 20,000 and 46,000 people. The civilization burned its settlements down every 60 to 80 years and often built new structures at the same sites. For example, the Pădure site in Romania contains 13 layers of remains from settlements that were destroyed and buried by new buildings. Researchers have no clue why the Kukuteni Tripillions did this, but it limited the amount of artifacts they left behind. The civilization also left no signs of a written language. As a result, experts have very little to learn about them. The few artifacts that were found intact include clay totems, copper tools, and spiritual objects. Kukuteni Tripillion settlements were first discovered during the late 19th century. Recent findings reveal that the obscure culture played a bigger role in human advancement than it's given credit for. But because of their habit of destroying the evidence, we'll probably never know the true extent of their knowledge and capabilities. Can you imagine burning your house down every 60 years and having to rebuild it? Let me know in the comments below. Number 3. Kurma. The Kurma culture was one of Africa's earliest civilizations. It established its self-named capital city at least 5,500 years ago in what is now Sudan. Kurma is one of the largest archaeological sites in ancient Nubia, a sub-Saharan region that was known for its gold deposits, incense, ivory, and other luxury products. By 1700 BC, the city was home to at least 10,000 residents. At its peak, it was the most powerful urban center in the region. The city had a royal audience hall, a palace, a mud brick temple, funerary temples, and chapels. Pottery and other items left behind by the Kurma are culturally distinct from the artifacts of neighboring kingdoms, including ancient Egypt. What's more, Kurman artifacts have been found over 200 miles from Kurma, reflecting the society's far-reaching ties with other groups. But the 30,000 graves at Kurma's cemetery show that the civilization was not completely free of influence from outsiders. The Kurmans surrounded large graves with smaller burials, showing that they had a social hierarchy that may have been inspired by Egypt's societal structure. Some of their royal burials contain images of the god Horus and other Egyptian deities, as well as Egyptian pottery, amulets, and scarab seals. Egypt and Kurma clearly traded both material goods and cultural ideas, but their relationship soured at some point, and the Egyptians sacked the city around 1500 BC. Kurma went on to serve as the headquarters for several of the new kingdom's rulers. Number 2. Etruscans. Italy's Tuscany region was once known as Etruskia, and it was home to one of the most advanced ancient societies to develop outside of ancient Greece. The earliest known evidence of the Etruscan civilization dates back to around 900 BC, and the oldest examples of their writing originated around 700 BC. But their texts did not survive into modern times, leaving scholars to rely solely on Greek and Roman sources. As a result, even the best experts can only partially understand the Etruscan language. There are numerous problems that come with trying to learn about the Etruscans based on what people from other cultures wrote about them. For example, archaeological evidence suggests that the Etruscans were indigenous to Eretria, but the Greeks wrote that the Etruscans descended from the indigenous Pelasgian population of Greece. The Greeks may have seen the Etruscans and the Pelasgians trading with each other, and the two societies may have had some similar traditions and customs, but any shared aspects of their lifestyles likely resulted from cultural exchange rather than migration, according to expert Dominique Briquel. The Etruscans began assimilating into Roman society during the 4th century BC, after losing a series of conflicts known as the Roman-Etruscan Wars. They were granted Roman citizenship around 90 BC, and in the following decades their territory was incorporated into the Roman Empire. Much of the Etruscan culture was likely lost throughout this transition, and even DNA studies have failed to determine exactly where the civilization came from. Number 1. The Geroft Culture. During the 3rd millennium BC, in what is now Iran's Halil River Valley, an early Bronze Age civilization called the Geroft Culture emerged. The obscure culture's sprawling urban settlement was surrounded by rugged mountains on 3 sides and consisted of 2 large burial mounds, a fortified citadel, and numerous smaller buildings. The Geroft people had a sophisticated lifestyle and a complex social hierarchy for their time. They practiced religion and crafted fine goods like vases and statues. After peaking sometime between 2500 and 2200 BC, the civilization abandoned its settlements for unknown reasons. Their deserted villages were buried and forgotten. The sites were rediscovered during the early 20th century. They were excavated several times, but also fell victim to looters, leaving few artifacts for experts to learn from. Consequently, modern scholars know very little about the Geroft culture. It's clear that the people were a distinct group with their own architecture, language, beliefs, and a writing system that consisted of geometric figures. Some researchers believe that the society may very well be one of the cradles of civilization, one of the first places in the world where complex urban centers grew. It's even possible that the Geroft culture was once as great as the Sumerians or ancient Mesopotamia. Unfortunately, most of what they left behind has been lost to history. Thanks for watching! Which ancient civilization is your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to learn about more mysterious lost civilizations, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more. See you soon! Bye!